Mrs. Judy Cammack from the historic Boston Partnership talks to Grace Hasnip, a young journalist from Boston High School, about the laying of the Puritan path outside St. Botolph's Church in Boston, Lincolnshire. Standing proud above the fens, St. Botolph's is sited upon the original Norman church, which in 1309 was transformed from a small parish church to the cathedral-like structure that we see today. The tower stands at 272 feet high and can be seen on a clear day from East Anglia on the other side of the Wash. Known locally as the Stump, the church is situated in the centre of the town and has always played a significant role in the lives of the people of Boston. Perhaps most significantly in the early 1600s when the congregation was seeking to reform the church. Whilst the Pilgrim Fathers are known for fleeing the country in pursuit of religious freedom separate from the Church of England, the Puritans sought to purify the church from within and were given permission to leave to establish a new colony abroad.
What is the Puritan's path?
The Puritan path is a set of stones placed in the south side of the St. Botolph's Church in the closed churchyard, commemorating 12 people from St. Botolph's Church, Boston, who went in the 1630s and were very instrumental in founding Boston, Massachusetts.
What's the inspiration behind the Puritan path?
Well, the inspiration for the path came from my husband John. We were in the first church in Boston, Massachusetts, and in that church there's a series of calligraphic memorials to many of the early congregations of the first church, amongst them many members of St. Botolph's Church who went over to America. John thought, this is ridiculous. These people came from Boston. They worshipped at St. Botolph's Church, and yet we have very little to commemorate these people. And of course, it's the one place in this country where they can all be commemorated together.
From the stones that you've told us about, there seem to have been some really interesting characters among those who originally sailed to Boston. What's your favourite tales from those you know?
Well, it's rather difficult. I greatly admire, not surprisingly, the two ladies, because they had both received a good education. Anne Hutchinson particularly, who was almost a disciple of John Cotton, who used to come here to the church to worship all the way from Alford, and that was a long journey with no metalled roads, no street lights, and she would come here regularly with her husband and her children, and she had received a good education. She went in 1634, and a lady of very strong belief, great character, who eventually, because of what were called religious misdemeanours by the General Court, she was actually exiled and ended her days having been to Rhode Island and also to New York. And she ended her days with all but one of her children massacred by Indians. Another person who I do admire is Anne Dudley Bradstreet, whose father was the steward to the Earl of Lincoln. She was therefore receiving a very good education with the Earl of Lincoln's children. She married Simon Bradstreet from Horbling when she was quite young, about 16, and 2 years later she went with Simon to Boston. She went on with the original sailing in 1630. She sailed on the Arbella, and having settled initially in Boston, she and Simon moved to various places and ended their lives in North Andover, just a little north of Boston. She was a poetess, a poet we should call her nowadays, but she wrote an amazing amount of poetry over in Massachusetts, and her work was published without her knowledge about 1650 in London, and she is therefore the first published woman poet in both England and in America.
I had 8 birds hatched in one nest, 4 cocks there were, and hens the rest. I nursed them up with pain and care, nor cost nor labour did I spare, till at the last they felt their wing, mounted the trees, and learned to sing.
St Botolph's Tower still provides the finest view of 21st century Boston. The town is still steeped in tradition and blessed with many fine buildings. It is again growing in size and stature with renewed international links arising from its position at the heart of our efficient, productive and sophisticated agri-food industry. The partnership that historic Boston created with their counterparts in Boston, Massachusetts, which led to the laying of these commemorative stones, is a fitting reminder of the courageous Puritans who left these shores almost 400 years ago.